What's going on, guys? This is JACOBVIRAL. Today I have a pretty important discussion to make. A lot of people really don't consider this when it comes to wiring, but this is something I'm going to talk about in this video for a few minutes. Sorry it's a little loud, it's in the morning with animals, but that's the nature of everything. So the topic is going to be focused on grounding your alternator. So this is really important for anybody that has a cardio system that has a high output alternator, or even a regular stock alternator. This is something that a lot of people really don't consider. Is they'll do the big three, but they never want to do the big four. The fourth most important one, I personally would say, is running your alternator chassis to your rear batteries. So you're definitely going to want to consider this. So what I mean by this is, if you have back batteries. So I have a front battery, but I also have a rear battery. So a lot of cardio systems, if you're running more than 1,000 watts, you always want to have two batteries, especially to have the battery reserve capacity without lights flickering, electrical issues. Your voltage is below 13s, that's having issues with electrical. That's where you have signs of showing that you need a second battery if you haven't already. Anyway, back to it. So what happens is, a lot of people would have a back battery back there, I'll show you in a minute, where all they do is ground it to the chassis, or they ground it to an area on the vehicle, in the trunk, on the car, on a spot in the seat, on a bolt that was there from stock, stuff like that. But for this, you're definitely going to want to have some form of zero gauge runs to your rear battery. So I highly recommend doubling up if you can. So I have 2 runs of OFC zero gauge ran from my stock location to my rear battery. The reason you do this is so you can guarantee you have 100% connection ground points to your alternator, as well as that's the safest connection point for it, because your alternator is what's going to help maintain or kind of help support your battery system. So you want to have grounds there. And I also have a third ground that I rigged up that I have ran to my front battery. So that way I guarantee. Some people are going to be asking, so what kind of voltage difference did you see? If you have good grounds in the back into the chassis, you're probably going to see minimal, but I actually did notice at least a 0.2 volt difference when I had my 160 dB build, where I was literally constantly maintaining at least a 0.2 volt difference with these grounds versus not, especially when I had full tilt, a lot of current coming through with 10,000 plus watts clamped at any given time with the old system. I would notice that difference. So multiple runs of zero gauge going to the back, especially when you got multiple alternators, you can just link up the grounds between the alternators or on a distribution block to run over. So that's what I have for this. Let me go to the back to show you before I end. This will be a short video for everybody. So remember, this is not the prettiest, but I'm telling you the concept works. So ignore the wiring. It's not the best, but it's on camera for you guys to enjoy. So here's the discussion on this. So I got my back battery. So currently I have my grounds ran, my 2 grounds here are ran to the negative side of this battery. This is a big AGM Group 75, the biggest, probably biggest battery I've ever had. Weighs like 98 pounds. Anyway, so I have my grounds ran to my amp, but what happens is I have a couple of grounds ran just to the frame. I have 2 grounds ran to the frame, just somewhere on my vehicle chassis area, they call it. But then I also have the 2 grounds ran. These, I'm pretty sure it's these, or one of these. Yep. These are ran and actually ran underneath my vehicle, and I have it ran all the way to the front. So this is where I was wanting to make a video on this for a lot of you cardio guys that may not consider this. You might want to look into it. It's safer. For one, if anything else, you want to be safe, so it's safe to control that. And then you also are going to guarantee better current flow. And you can guarantee that you're not going to have any kind of connective problems between your alternator and your back batteries. Because if you're trusting your chassis as your only connection points, so what happens between your chassis and your alternator? So that's the biggest question you want to ask is, well, I mean, we kind of have variables we can't control with that. There's heat. Depending on what the cold or hot temperature is, the weather can control that. Rust, debris, outside climate control, rain, water, materials, just in general things that you can think about. So if you got the budget, invest in some OFC 100% auction free if you can afford it, or just some CCA, either one works. Get some zero gauge runs, 1 minimum, recommend 2, so that way you're better double up safe. Always double up if you can afford it. And run your grounds to your alternator chassis all the way to your back batteries, and that's it. So whether you have a trunk build, you're a wall build, you got a big amp rack, you got 10 amps, you got 1 amp, this concept you really want to utilize. I'm telling you. Thanks guys for always watching. Hope you guys learned something from this, and if you have questions, concerns, or anything, let me know. I'll see y'all next time.